All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to join us for our webinar. I'm Maureen Gribble with UE Systems. Yes, I am the one who sends you all those emails, but I appreciate you guys keeping an eye out for those, and hopefully we're providing some good information here and there. So that's a little bit about me. Today we've got Shon Isenhour from Eruditio talking about planning for planners that really plan. Pretty good topic and pretty timely. So we're looking forward to what he has to share with us today. And I know a lot of you are clearly excited as well, as we've got kind of a record-breaking crowd with us today. So that's exciting. Before we toss things over to Shon, just a couple things. You know, life is, as everybody knows, pretty crazy right now. Some of you are probably listening to this from home, which you're not used to doing, or from an even busier plant or a plant that's not so busy. So it's just kind of crazy times for everybody. And so we just want to make sure that you guys know that at UE Systems, we're here to support everybody, to do what we can. You know, we've got all of our trainers are off the road, of course. So if you have specific needs, software that you need some help with, equipment that you have questions about, anything really, we're happy to kind of be your personal trainer, at least as far as ultrasound is concerned, during this time. So whether it's hopping on a Zoom meeting, a go-to meeting, just a phone call, whatever it is, you know, definitely take advantage of that. We've got time, you guys have some time. And so let's try and be as productive as we can. A lot of you saw, you know, our email about the online compressed air class. So in a world right now where you're kind of being told all the things you can't do, we're trying to help focus on the things you can, ways that you can be productive and make a positive impact at this time in our lives here, where things are a little uncertain. But so just kind of keep that in mind. We'll have our contact info at the end, though I'm sure most of you know how to be in touch with us. Of course, our website, things like that. So don't hesitate to reach out. Again, we're here to help. Just a couple housekeeping things, and then I will let Shon get going. We are recording this, so if you have to hop off, or if you're running out of things to watch on Netflix and you just want to check this out 3 more times the rest of this week, we'll have that available on our website, so you can check that out. We do welcome questions. You can type those in. I'll be keeping an eye on those throughout the session, and I'll toss them over to Shon as we see fit. And if, of course, we don't get to all of them, we'll be sure to get them over to Shon so he can follow up offline with you guys as well. And then, you know, just ignore any barking, yelling, arguing you might hear. Those sounds are coming from inside the house. I've got my family barricaded upstairs in the bedroom, and they may just have to think this webinar is like 5 hours long. I don't know. We may keep them up there a little bit longer. But all that to say, you know, we're all kind of laughing a little bit. It's what we have to do at this time. But again, really, really appreciate you guys being here, and Shon for doing this webinar. So with that, I will turn the screen over to you, Shon, and we'll let you take it away.
Very good. Thank you, Maureen. Thank you for having us on. I'm going to go ahead and go full screen here. Maureen, does that look okay from your side?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Welcome to a presentation that I had a really good time putting together this week. It's a relatively new presentation. It's really a work in progress, and I'm going to continue to build upon it for a while. But you guys are going to get to see it for the first time today, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. I hope it spurs some conversation. I know a lot of us are locked up and barricaded, as Maureen said, in our homes. So if you see things here and you want to talk about them afterwards, I'll make sure my contact information is there, and we can definitely connect up and talk a little more. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today we're going to talk about planning, and we're going to talk about planning for planners who really plan. And the real reason behind this presentation is last year, toward the end of the year, I did quite a few presentations at various conferences. And as I would get a chance from the conference stage to ask questions and poll the audience, if you will, one of the things that I really noticed was that even though I believe that planning is core to making reliability efforts work well, only about 3% of my audience could look me in the eyes and say that they have planners who are really planning jobs with a step text and the details that need to be in there, and building that job plan library so that they can pass that information and reuse it in the future. And that seemed pretty shocking to me that, even every single conference, different venues, different locations, different industries, still the numbers were just minimal from that perspective. So I've got a little bit of focus on this. I'm going to really be digging deeper into it over the next few weeks. Now, some of you may be trying to understand planning and why that's important. So let's talk about the why now part. First of all, lack of planning significantly reduces the effectiveness of maintenance and reliability. Whether it's using predictive tools or having RCM efforts in place, reliability centered maintenance efforts in place, at the end of the day, if you're identifying defects but you're not planning and scheduling those defects, then you're missing a lot of the opportunity. In fact, depending on the study that you look at, a unplanned job is anywhere from 5 to 7 times more expensive to execute than a planned and scheduled repair. So there is a financial component right out of the gate, not even to mention many of the other things. You see them listed here. Planned jobs, if you look at Ron Moore's statistics in his book, Making Common Sense Common Practice, planned jobs are safer. The statistics prove it. If you look at planned jobs, they are faster. They take less downtime to complete. As I said a second ago, they're cheaper to execute. And at the end of the day, a planned job is one that has the steps that makes the repair a better quality repair. So we don't get reoccurring failures. We don't end up dealing with the same issues over and over. That's the why now, because I think especially with the COVID-19 battles that we're going to be facing, some of you are looking at mad production that you've never seen before because you're just trying to keep up from a medical industry. I know I'm hearing that, and quite a few other industries. Food is another one. And then on the other hand, you may be in automotive or some of the other organizations where they're just not making any product right now. So in those situations, coming out of it, it's going to be a different story than what we had going in. So I think that's definitely coming. The next piece for planning and why it's important is it's the backbone of real results. We can do a lot of other really good things, but if at the end of the day we haven't put planning and scheduling in place, I don't think we can attain the results that we're hoping for. The COVID-19 unfortunateness, for lack of a better word, what it's doing to manufacturing, I think is going to trip the breaker, if you will. It's going to give us a reset. It's going to give us a point to start back and really do things right. So a big part of this presentation is to give you some ideas that you can then work through over the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, however long we remain, many of us in sequester in our homes or in the office with a little more time than we traditionally have. It'll give us a chance to get things ready so that we can start up clean moving forward. But the big thing that I want to drive home as I take you through all these pieces is that we have to have a plan. If we don't have a plan, it's really easy to get overwhelmed. It's really easy to get confused. It's really easy not to get all the pieces together such that they fit in a way that works. So with that said, what are my 10? And in this webinar, that was one of the big things that I wanted to do. I wanted to look at what are the big items that if I put these things in place, I believe an organization can then plan and schedule much more effectively. Now, these are my 10. They're based on my thoughts over the last week and a half, 2 weeks. But if you've got others, let's talk about them. So definitely reach out to me afterwards and let's add them in, because as I said, this is a work in progress. I'm going to add more things to it. So the first thing in our 10, it's not the sexiest thing in the list, but it is probably one of the more critical, and that is the work execution business processes. And we'll go into more detail around each of these in a few minutes, but that is how you get work done within your organization. Item number 2 is a RACI or a RASI. It's an acronym. It stands for responsible, accountable, support, and information, or responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. You see different flavors or different versions of them in different organizations. But the idea is that you take the steps that are in the process and you determine who is responsible or accountable for each of those steps moving forward. Number 3 on my list, if you're going to build processes, you really need step text. Step text tells me more detail about what each one of those boxes are, and I'll show you examples of all 3 of those here in a few minutes. Now, as we move a little further, I'm going to dive into taking that stuff that we created there, that work execution process, those RASIs, those step text, and really starting to sort them by job title. So by sorting them by job title, we can begin to see what are the real responsibilities for various roles within our organization. And of course, today we're going to talk specifically about the planner and scheduler role. And so we'll focus there, and I'll show you some examples. After that, the next thing I think you need in your Big 10 is a CMMS or EAM usage expectation. And it really needs to be for all affected employees. And I'll talk more about this one as well, but what do you want from them? What fields do they need to populate? How much detail do they need to put? Can you give them examples? Can you give them samples? All right. All of that is contained in those user expectations. The next in my 10 list is the job plan library. And I talk to a lot of folks, and they're beginning to plan jobs. They're beginning to make some progress, but they don't necessarily have a good organized job plan. And the reason you want this is because at the end of the day, this job plan library is going to give you a place to reach back and steal from. It's going to give you efficiency. It's going to make planning jobs even faster. Now, the next one in my list is going to be job plan expectations with precision maintenance standards. And I'll show you what I mean by that here in a few minutes. But at the end of the day, when a planner plans a job, what do we as an organization expect that to look like? And is there different levels of that depending on the job and the situation? So those are those expectations. Number 8 on my list is a scheduling template, and I'll show you an example of this, but at the end of the day, this could be software for you and your organization, or it could be a document, an Excel sheet. Any one of number of tools could be used to make this work, but we'll talk more about that as we get down into that section. Number 9 on my list, what do you expect for your parts list? What do you expect in your bill of materials? We're going to look at an example very quickly. I'll show you one of those and talk about how do we make sure that it's documented what we want to see loaded in every single time for every single part that is a part of our bill of materials, or BOM. And number 10 on my list is the kitting expectation. If we have a great bill of materials, if we know what the parts are that the equipment needs, then we can begin to build job kits that really add a lot of efficiency and a lot of speed into the execution of the work. So these are the topics that we're going to cover today. I'm going to show you examples of many of them. I've got a lot more that I've got on my computer that I'll be kind of working through in the future, but I just wanted to be able to take you through each of these 10 items today as part of the presentation. So let's talk about processes, and processes really start with a mega level. To me, there is a mega level and there is a micro level. The mega level explains to the organization what the major steps of work execution are. I pulled an example here from a presentation that we did at SMRP last year. And what you see here is a mega level process. There are sub processes or micro level processes underneath each one of these areas. But if I'm explaining it to the organization that, hey, we're going to have processes moving forward, I don't necessarily want to explain every single one of those micro level processes. So this gives me a way to convey what we're doing moving forward. You see in here work ID, work approval, planning, kitting, scheduling, work execution, follow-up. You see all of those pieces that are part of that mega level process. Now, if we were to drill down into one of those, which we will in the next slide, you'll see they look more like a flow chart now, and we're getting into more of the details. But one of the things that I think is very important is you explain to the organization using the mega. That's how I explain how this fits in our organization, how we're going to use it more going forward. But you only teach them their specific micro or sub-level processes. So we don't want to overwhelm people. A lot of times I see folks trying to give everyone training on everything. And at the end of the day, one training for everybody means that 80 or 90% of that training was not value added for their specific role. So we want to break it down and really begin to understand those details. So this is a quick example of a micro level or a sub-level process. You can see where the work is coming into the process. You can follow it through. You see where decisions are being made. You've got labels on each of the steps so that we can refer to them in other documents moving forward. So all of that is here for us to be able to see what's happening at that micro level. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to talk about that RASI or RACI chart. When we talk about it, we're talking about it at each one of these steps. So for each one of these boxes that you see that is labeled here, many of them are in orange, there will be a responsible person for that. There will be an accountable person. There will be support. There will be information that is flowing in and out of it. So we're beginning to understand what we're doing as an organization at the individual step level moving forward. All right, so we've looked at macro level and we've looked at micro level. Now we're going to move on into those RASIs. So as you look, what you see here is a RASI diagram. This is just one example. Everything that I pulled here, I pulled from our students as they've submitted it in the past. So what you're looking at here, you'll notice the work process steps are numbered down the side. You can actually see the text that would be in the box for each of those. Up at the top, you can see that they've defined the process as being a RASI process. So you see that responsible for the step, accountable if the step doesn't happen, the support that needs to occur, and any information or informed things that need to happen in each of these steps. Now, as you go across, you see, and you don't see all of them, I cut this out of a much larger sheet, but you see many of the different positions within the organization, and you can see down below what they're responsible for and what they're accountable for, what support and information is going to be engaged in those steps. Now, in the work execution process, because many different roles do the same thing, you will see R's or responsibles for multiples. But in general, we do try to limit responsibility to one person so that we know, or one role, so that we know that it is happening. But this is an example of one of these RASIs or RACIs being used to understand who is specifically going to do the steps. If I know who is specifically going to do the steps in the process, then I can make sure my training is tailored specifically to those individuals' jobs in this process.
Hey, Shon.
Yes.
Do you mind closing out your little WebEx reminder? It's blocking some of the content.
Yep.
There you go. Now your beautiful logo. See, you were blocking your branding there. There you go. All set.
All right. So we're going to move on now, and we're going to look at the step text. And there's nothing really pretty about these. There's nothing necessarily exciting about them, but this gives the detail behind each one of those steps. So if an individual is confused about what we mean in one of the boxes above, they can go into this document, they can look up that box, and they can get a lot more detail and understanding as to what that means and where it goes. So you see two different beginnings of some step definitions here. I just cut them out of the larger documents to give you an idea for what they might look like. So again, to kind of recap what we've seen so far, the first thing that we had up there at the top was our macro process, our big, what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Then we got into the micro level processes. We broke those down with RASIs, and we've created a definition for each box so that folks can be very clear on what the expectation is. So that is our first 3 of the 10 elements. Now, if we take those steps that we've worked through and we begin to compile them by role, so pull all of the R's for a maintenance manager, pull all of the R's for a maintenance supervisor, pull all of the R's for a maintenance planner or scheduler, which is our focus today. When we pull those together, now we can begin to compare those to the job descriptions that reside within HR. And I think a lot of people stop at that previous step and they don't make it to this point. And I think this is the point we are trying to drive home, because this is the document that we use to hire new planners. This is the document that we use in the performance review routines that we do. This is how we're communicating the expectations of the role to these individuals. And I hear a lot of planners say, you know, they gave me one document that gave me a job description, but when I got into the role, they asked me to do something completely different. So this document here has got to be tailored based on the R's and the A's from that previous document. So I pulled one sample here just to take a look at. It is not aligned with their R's and A's, but it gives you this document, which now I can compare and I can refine. And then I have a document moving forward that I can use, that I can hire, I can coach, I can do everything with, and it truly is a process-driven document. Now, how do you roll this out? What do you do with it? Where does it live? What do people use? Let's talk about that for a little bit. So you've got a document that is your processes and your RASIs and your step text. And I colored that one blue because that's kind of one set of things. If we sort all of those by title and begin to pull out those responsibles and countables, then we can go and do my red section here, which is overview of the big process, then train to the title, not the process, meaning that we're going to train to their role, not to just all the processes that we've created and overwhelm them. Now this next level down, it's kind of a gold color. This is our standards of expectation. And this is where we're going to spend the next few minutes as we go through this presentation. We're going to dig into these expectations because I think this is an area where maybe some of you don't have these documents and it's not super clear what people are expected to do even within a process. So we'll dive in a little deeper there in a minute. And then the last thing, and this has become more and more important to me over the last few years, is this idea of job aids or a note card with a checklist. It's something that you can look at and you can see, oh, I forgot to do this step, or oh, here are those 5 codes that I use on a regular basis, or whatever those things are that you forget on a regular basis, they can become part of this. And as they become part of it, these are little reminders. For those of you that have said in any of my presentations or James Kovacevic's presentations on a book that we've come to love over the last couple of years called the Checklist Manifesto, you know exactly what we're talking about here. And at the end of the day, what we learn in that book, the Checklist Manifesto, is that if we create short checklist, 5, 6, 7, 10 items, put them on a card that we can have, a job aid that we can use when we're in the field doing the work, the performance and execution to a quality level goes up substantially for those. And they talk about it in the medical field, they talk about it in aviation. There's a reason why that doctor has a checklist. There's a reason why that pilot has a checklist every single time. And it's not because they haven't had a lot of time to practice. It's because it's real easy to forget. So those job aids are your last step. So your first step is to get those RASIs and processes. Your second step is to sort them and create training specific to the role. Your third is to write a document that it tells them exactly what you expect in the system. And the fourth is to make a note card or a checklist or a reminder that they can have right there on their desk or in their shirt pocket or wherever that reminds them of the steps they want to have moving forward. So let's look at CMMS expectations, or you may call yours EAM or Enterprise Asset Management. But has anyone created a clear set of expectations? Now, sometimes this resides within the step text of the processes, but I'm suggesting that maybe it ought to be brought forward and put into a condensed document. So what do you want to see in your fields? How much is enough? What level of detail? What fields do you want populated? What codes do they have to put in? What do the codes mean? All right. So all of those things that you want the CMMS to be populated with, we need to tell them what we expect. I think there's nothing worse than putting a bunch of failure codes in a CMMS system, but never explaining what the failure codes mean to the people who are going to have to populate them. So this is about creating that expectation and explaining what we want. If it has a text box, what do you want in it? What do we expect to see there? We can make that clear in a real simple 1 or 2 page document that explains those pieces and communicates that out to the organization. Now, the next thing that I believe we have to have in order to really have world-class planning is a job plan library expectation. We're going to talk about the job plans specifically in the next slide, but this one is about that job plan library. Where is it going to be stored? Are you going to keep it in your computerized maintenance management system? Are you going to keep it in your enterprise asset management system? Or is it going to reside on a server or in a SharePoint site? I'm not going to argue which one is right and which one is wrong. I can tell you that I've seen organizations be successful with both of these. So they're able to put it in the CMMS and be successful. They're able to keep it on a server somewhere or put it in SharePoint and still be successful. I think you just have to figure out what works for you, specifically within the context of your EAM or CMMS, and where is it going to be easiest to steal content from? Because I want them to go in and cut the front and back out of that document and reuse it again and again and again to speed up our planning process as we move forward. The next thing you got to figure out is, how are you going to store it? If you store it in the CMMS or the EAM, are we going to store it in the asset class category? Are we going to store it at the individual asset level? Are you going to store it in something that looks like a hierarchy? This becomes really important. I mean, do you have a whole bunch of the same kind of equipment, and would it make more sense to group it by equipment type and have your job plans exist within a job plan library by equipment type? It's up for debate. It's up for discussion. I think you can figure out what works for you, but my point is there needs to be a standard. There needs to be an expectation for what our job plan library is going to look like in the facility and how we're going to use it to speed up the planning process long term. The next thing I would ask is, if you start building a job plan library, maybe you don't have one today, maybe you're just beginning to start that, then how many plans per week do you want to see from your planners? All right, can they reuse them, or do they have to be brand new? But the idea here is we need to set an expectation that begins to populate those folders or those pockets or those asset classes with all of the good real job plans moving forward. Now, job plan expectations. So before we talked about the job plan library, it's the place where we're going to put all this stuff. But here now we're beginning to talk about the job plans themselves. And what do you expect your planners to plan to? Some organizations, when I look at the job plans, I see things like winter shutdown, and it's not really well defined internally. Others, I see they've broken their job plans down further and they're giving us a specific piece of equipment that they may want to begin to replace or work on a repair. Others are breaking it down to that task level. And so now they're building out the specific task that they need to do. Even others go a step further and they put in the steps underneath those tasks. And then the really world-class facilities, they go all the way down to the instructions where they are giving torque specs, alignment standards, bolt grades, balance standards. All of those sort of things are being conveyed to those individuals moving forward. So my point here is, have you conveyed to your planners what a really good job plan needs to look like? So have you conveyed to them what you expect? And it's not going to be the same for every job. I get that. I get that I don't have to plan non-critical jobs that aren't going to be very safety engaged. I don't have to have this level of planning for those. But what do you expect? What is good enough? Let's define that. Let's set some expectations so that when a planner sits down to plan that job, they know what they need to do and what your expectation is from an organizational standpoint. There's a couple examples in here of various instructions and steps. I've got a ton of these on my computer if you have more questions, but I just wanted to share with you the fact that I believe if you want to be world-class at planning your critical jobs that have safety involved, they need to be broken down all the way into those steps and instructions. Here's an example of what that might look like in the real world. One of our students submitted this one last year or the year before. And what you're looking at here are the individual steps. You're looking at some warnings that they've put in there in red. They've even got a picture in there to explain one of the concepts. You can see over on the side where our coach was coaching them through some of the things that they were doing there. But this same format could be used by you to create an example of your expectation or standard for job plans moving forward. You could show a job plan, and then over to the side, just like we've done here, you could tell them why this is important and what needs to be in here and what your expectation is. If we can set this up, then there's always that pretty picture that exists. We always have something to compare it to. Reminds me a little bit of the 5S world. You know, you're out there organizing your equipment, getting things the way it needs to be. When you finish, you take a picture. You show people what good looks like, and this becomes that new expectation moving forward. That's exactly what I see when I look at this document. All right, now here are some of the things that I think need to be included. If you look back previously, we talked about the instructions that need to be added in or the steps that may need to be there. This is an example of some of those instructions that might come in. Are you including precision tools in your job plans? Are you giving them the best way to truly maintain those assets with a mind for precision? All right, and I think we have to set an expectation. Just like we have an expectation for what a job plan looks like, I think we have to say, what are the expectations for the precision maintenance tools that are going to be applied moving forward? Now, some of you that know me know that I've also been a big proponent of precision tools, probably more so over the last few years than I ever have in my career. And one of the reasons that I've done that is because I see our equipment base changing. I see equipment that was 50 years old, and I see a lot of us even still have some of that 50-year-old equipment. It's cam driven. It's running off of belts and chains that are over engineered and over designed. And so quite frankly, you could hit it with a forklift and it would still be just fine. But then when you look at a lot of the newer equipment that is coming into our facilities through the capital process, we don't see that same level of robust design. We don't see cam-driven timing. Now we see servo controls and proc switches and electronics. That stuff is making precision maintenance so much more important. Because where I used to could just get it close and it would be fine, now if I'm off by just a little bit, it has major implications to the reliability of that asset. So as you're looking at setting up your expectations for precision maintenance, you may want to consider the age of the equipment or the robustness of that design as part of what you want to make sure you're guaranteeing we deliver in our best practice documents moving forward. Now, the next tool that I think has to exist is there needs to be a standard scheduling template. And there is definitely software out there that you can use, but I'm going to talk about Excel today because, you know, I know that right now we can't necessarily go out and buy software. We can't necessarily spend money in a lot of the facilities, or even we can't get it through IT at the moment for various and sundry reasons. So you can build a good scheduling template in Excel. You can have it pull data. You can use macros to move data around. In fact, if you were to see the full document that I pulled this sample from, you would see that as you populate this document here, it populates other schedules and builds out things for the individual so that they can truly execute the work. But the idea here is if we've created good job plans, we now have good estimates of how long they take. We can put them into our scheduling template. We can associate labor to them. And what I hope you'll see, what I see in the facilities that we're working with, is a schedule compliance number that starts going up and up and up. We're able to execute what we tell people we're going to do. And I think this fights a very common problem that many of us face, and that is that I can't give operations to give me the equipment to do the maintenance that I need. Well, my answer to many of us would be, well, they don't want to give it to you because you don't give it back when you say, or you don't give it back in a condition where it'll run. Call it tough love, but at the end of the day, I don't want to take my car to the dealership if they can't tell me when they're going to give it back to me, or they can't tell me if it's going to run when I get in it to leave the dealership. So I firmly believe that creating good job plans will refine your estimates. Those job plans will also allow you to be more accurate with your schedules and will allow you to increase your schedule compliance and building a better relationship with operations through that process. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't believe that you can plan a job 100% and get the time right every time. It's not quote unquote standardized work, and I don't want to leave that misconception. But I do believe that you can get within 85% on average. And I do believe that if you can get within 85%, some jobs may be a little longer, others are going to be a little shorter. We'll move things around a little bit over there in the supervisory world, and voila, we have met our scheduling goals for the week. All right, so I wanted to take the time to say, you know, we can focus on planning, but at the end of the day, if we aren't building a good schedule, a lot of that planned work will never see the light of day. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about in our list of 10 today is a bill of materials expectation. So what do we expect people to put in our CMMS, our EAM, from a materials standpoint? And I put an example up here so you can see what it looks like. But at the end of the day, I want it to be very clear how things need to be named, where we expect them to be, what the description should contain, what vendors we should have associated with it. I want people to understand the expectations for the bill of materials, because the bill of materials is critical to us controlling inventory. It is also critical to us being able to kit the jobs, which is the last thing we're going to talk about today. So when you look at this example here, you're looking at a piece of equipment. If I had the full bill of materials and I needed to plan a job, I would be able to go in here and select the items, knowing that when that job gets kitted up, it is going to be the right parts for that piece of equipment because of the cleanliness and because of the definition that's been put into this bill of materials. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about today, before we kind of wrap this thing up, is this idea of kitting and kitting expectations. I am a huge proponent of kitting. I think it brings a lot of efficiency into the organization. And I think if you think of it like NASCAR, I mean, if you think about a pit stop, if they came in for a pit stop and some guy had to go find the lug nuts behind the wall and another guy had to get the ratchet out of the toolbox or had to get the air wrench out of the toolbox, if another guy had to go over and get the window wiper and the spray bottle, I mean, there's no way they could do a really high performance pit stop in the times that they're turning. So at the end of the day, if we want to speed up our maintenance process, all of those things, that air wrench, those lug nuts, everything needs to be exactly where I can get to it very quickly and know that it's all there and it's the right part. So the questions I would say is, for your organization, what is in a kit? What do you expect to see? What can't be stored in a kit? Maybe it's too large and it needs to be in a large storage area, or maybe it's a hazard from a fire standpoint, so it's got to be in a fire cabinet. But what do you expect? What do you expect to be in that box when they open it? And what do you expect to be located elsewhere? And how is that communicated to them? When is the kit expected? Is it expected to just be in the storeroom? Is it expected to be in the kitting area in the location that the work is being done? Or is it expected to be delivered to the job at the scheduled time? All three of these could be options for you depending on what you're trying to do and what your areas look like within your facility. But at the end of the day, where do we expect that kit to be? When is it not kitted? So when are those times that we don't kit the item because of whatever reason? Maybe it's just one item, and because it's one item, we're not going to kit it. Maybe it just gets delivered. All right. Maybe if you have other reasons for when you're not going to kit things, we don't have a good bill of materials for this item, so I can't guarantee you enough quality in your kit to make it work. Those are completely legitimate reasons not to kit, but we need to know when we're going to make that decision. It needs to be cut and dried. And the last thing I would say, especially when talking about kits, are they secure? And I don't mean that we've got to go put fences and walls up everywhere. I don't think that's the solution. But if you look at that green box over there on the side, all I have to do is close that box and put a zip tie in the side. If I pull that zip tie tight, no one can open that box and take anything out of it. So now I can put that kit out in the area. Heck, I can put it right next to the equipment for execution. And when that maintenance tech walks up and looks down at it, he sees that tie. He knows that his kit has not been pilfered. Everything is in there. Now, on the flip side, I lived in the real world. Years ago, I worked for ExxonMobil, spent time with them. I know that there are going to be situations where we need to break into a kit because of a failure, and I get that. So the great thing about those zip ties is I break that zip tie off, I get that part I need for that emergency repair out of there, and now whoever is managing the kitted items can see very quickly that that kit is not complete anymore, and they know that that job either needs to be pulled back off of the schedule or it needs to be restocked such that that work can be completed moving forward. So with that said, you can kit items without spending a ton of money. You can kit items without building walls and chain link fences and security systems and card swipes and all those sort of things. You can simply buy some interlocking containers, put them in the area, put the parts that need to be in there, deliver them to wherever you expect them to be, and you've got yourself a very good kitting process. If you want to talk about any of these in more detail, feel free to reach out, but I wanted to at least hit on each of the 10 items a little bit as we went through today. So now I ask you, there's quite a few of you on the call today. It's going to be really hard to do a lot of talking back and forth, but I ask you guys, take a few seconds, look at my 10 items and answer in your mind, how many of those can you put a checkbox in today? All right, so I gave you just a few seconds there to run through that 10. If you can't put a checkbox in one of those today, my challenge to you is that over these next few weeks, if you do have more time because of the situation that we're dealing with COVID, attack one of these, just one, and work through it. And if you'll work through that item, you'll create that standard, you'll create that process, you'll create that template that's going to be used moving forward. You've got something to show for it when we come out the other side of this thing here in a few weeks. Now, I want to talk about support a little bit because I don't believe that a planner can save the world by themselves. In fact, I have seen many very good planners fail because of the lack of organizational support. So again, I mentioned it on the first slide. Do you have a plan? Do you know what you're going to do today, what you're going to do tomorrow, what you're going to do next week, and what the expectations are as we move through each of those phases? Do you have a vision? Do you know where you're going? So all of that becomes very important in supporting the planner and making sure that they're effective. Do you have reliability and or maintenance engineers? We don't expect planners to do all of the PM optimization. We don't expect planners to do all of the job plan library builds. We want reliability and maintenance engineers bringing in those best practices, bringing in precision maintenance techniques. And while I'm on this, a point that I really want to drive home today, when I say plan job, I don't mean preventive maintenance. And that's something I've seen. I've done a lot of assessments over the last few months, and that's something I continue to see. The only planning that is happening is the plans that are being created for preventive maintenance. When we talk about these plans that we're talking about today, we're talking about plans for the corrective maintenance, plans for the things that we find during those inspections and during those PMs, not just planning, or as I say, shuffling PM paperwork. So that's a little bit of a soapbox topic, but I want to make that point before we move forward. The next point, do you have a CMMS or EAN admin that is working with and for your planner? Are they helping that planner to create the steps that they need? Do they make your CMMS function to your work processes, not try to make the CMMS dictate your work processes? And this brings up another point that I can't help but get on a little bit of a soapbox. When we talk about business processes, guys, we're not talking about how your CMMS works. We're talking about how work is going to be done within the facility, not how you populate the fields. All right. So the next thing you see, do you have a natural team? Do you have an ops liaison, a maintenance supervisor, a planner, a scheduler that's working together, that are meeting on a regular basis, that are approving a schedule, that are selecting the work that's going to be on that schedule, and at the end of the day, that are committing to the execution of that schedule at least 1 week in advance? So this is how I believe you support the 10 items that we've talked about. If you begin to build those 10 items, these are the long-term things that you want to make sure you're putting in place to guarantee that success. Now, Iridicio also wants to support, and we know that during this time of the COVID-19, a lot of folks are discovering a little extra time that they didn't have before. And maybe they need a little help, they need a little coaching, they need a little poke to get moving. We want to help you guys with that. So we've started a program we're calling Iridicio and Friends. And it's really about supporting you guys out there in the manufacturing world. We're going to make available, and it's already beginning to be populated, we're going to make available to you for no cost short-term project-based learning, videos, some e-learning, some coaching, some templates that you can use, and we're going to provide office hours so that you can talk with our coaches who have seen these things over and over with the different students that go through our IBL process. So if you would like to make a big change in your organization, even though you may be working from home over these next few weeks, I would highly recommend that you get involved in this program. It will be that possibly that little push you need to make a big difference. So if you want to learn more about it, you can go to help.eruditio.com. Again, that's help.eruditio.com. We've partnered up with a lot of other organizations, including UE Systems, to provide that coaching, to provide those things that you might need as you move forward. So with that said, don't forget, we want to make sure that when we come out of the COVID virus situation, that we have not fallen behind, that we have not slid back. We want to make sure that we're making progress moving forward. So again, thank you for joining me today. I'll put my information up here. If you saw something that I should have on my list, feel free to email me or give me a phone call. That is my cell phone there. If I don't answer, I will get back to you. But we really want to make sure we're helping you guys as you go forward. We're helping you develop a plan. We're helping you execute that plan. And hopefully you've got something you can show your boss is really a step change in what we've done during this COVID virus. Again, thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed the session. I hope you got some things you can go back and do and attack. And if you need a little bit of help on these, don't be afraid to reach out. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Maureen.
All right, awesome. Thanks. That was great information, and hopefully everybody takes some of those things away from the session today and can make some positive work out of it after today is done. So just a couple questions since we've got a little bit of time here. One person was asking, do you see a lot of planners? Oops, and then more questions are coming in, so that just made my screen go up. Okay, do you see a lot of planners also taking on the role of maintenance supervisor?
Oh, great question. So can a planner be a maintenance supervisor? The short answer is no. There is exceptions to the rule, of course, but what I mean by that is a supervisor is focused in the day-to-day execution. They're focused in making sure that that schedule gets done within that week. The planner is focused on the future. The planner is focused on next week's schedule and 2 weeks out and 3 weeks out. So when you put those two together, it can be very hard for that planner not to get pulled into those day-to-day activities. The day-to-day activities will almost always win. So given an opportunity, I will split those roles and have the planner be future focused and have the supervisor be in the day-to-day. Now, I realize some facilities based on size or whatever may not be able to do that, but if you can't split the roles, you've got to split the mind. You've got to say, on Monday and Tuesday for 4 hours, I'm going to plan jobs, and you've got to hold yourself to that and then switch into your day-to-day activities as a supervisor.
Awesome. Okay, so let's see. This person's saying that it seems that the CMMS tends to drive the schedule and that maintenance isn't always providing feedback. Any thoughts on that or ways you can kind of shift that way of thinking?
Probably need to know a little bit more specifically about what they're talking about. The CMMS, I mean, to me, the CMMS could drive the schedule, but the schedule is driven by the planner scheduler. So I'm not 100% sure I understand the question. But what I will add on to the second part of that is that, and I just had this conversation with a technician a few minutes ago during one of our maintenance assessments. It is critical for those maintenance technicians to give that feedback to the planner so that through continuous improvement, those job plans get better and those estimates of time get better in the long term.
All right, cool. And in the interest of time, there are some questions here that I will just get directly over to Shon. So if we didn't get to your question, I think that'll be our best bet. But I had several folks ask kind of questions along these lines. So let me just kind of answer these before we let everybody jump. We did record this. So if you missed that at the beginning, we were recording this session. We'll have it up on our website, hopefully here this afternoon. And we'll make that available also to Shon, so you can, reach out to me if you want the link directly, or to Shon. So that's going to be offered up to you. And then you've got Shon's information there. Shon, a lot of folks are kind of asking about getting access to your presentation or to some of the checklists and things like that. Are those items they might find on your website, or what's the kind of your best advice for getting that stuff?
The best thing we can do from that perspective is to have them reach out to me via email, and you can use the email address that's on the screen there in front of you, or you can just do sisenhour@energyshow.com. They'll both get to me. We'll share bits and pieces. I have to be very, very careful with some of the content because we're getting it from our students, so I've got to make sure that it's scrubbed and ready to be consumed for other folks, and so I'll do that moving forward.
Okay, awesome. And I'm just going to take the screen back here. And again, if you need Shon's info and you didn't get that written down, certainly reach out to me or to any of us here at UE Systems. You've got our info there showing up. But again, just want to thank everybody for taking the time today. We know it's kind of crazy time, so hopefully you've got some good information from Shon. We're going to be doing a lot more of these webinars. We know we've got kind of a captive audience right now, so we're going to try and share as much information and be as helpful as we can. Just reiterate what I said at the beginning, lean on us here at UE Systems. If you need any support with software or with instruments, or just questions about ultrasounds, certainly reach out. Don't hesitate. We are ready and willing to do what we can to be here and be a resource for you all throughout the year, not just during this time, but certainly we've got a little extra time on our hands as well to be that support for you guys. So we'll be sending out some information about some upcoming webinars. Definitely check out the website Shon mentioned. We're just all trying to do what we can to support each other and get through this and have a little fun while we can as well. So thanks again for joining us, Shon. Thank you for the awesome presentation today. And everybody just stay healthy, and we'll talk to you all soon.